All right, everybody, thank you so much for joining us today. This APTAT webinar for what is this month? September is about information and communication technology accessibility. We have the fantastic Jason Martin, who has a lot of accolades attached to his name, and he's quite entertaining. So I'm glad that he was able to do this for us today. He is an assistive technology specialist and trainer at the Center of Assistive Technology Training. We highly respect him in our world, and so we're super grateful. And now I will turn it over to you, Jason.
Oh, shucks, Ashley. Thank you. It's a very nice introduction. Let me share my screen here for a second. And because I'm wearing my big electric earmuffs, I'm going to take myself off video because I feel kind of goofy, but they sound really good. So let me just take a second here and get you guys hooked up.
You just look more technical, Jason.
That's exactly what it is. I could go in Alaska or the Arctic with these. Okay. All right. So hopefully everyone can see my screen. And so I guess this is the best place to start. Again, I'm Jason Martin. I work with the Center of Assistive Technology Training, and we're really focused on teaching individuals who are blind and visually impaired and the professionals who work with them about assistive technology devices, really provided by the American Printing House for the Blind. We're a partnership between AIDB and the Alabama Institute for Deaf and Blind and the American Printing House for the Blind. It's enough of my sales pitch, but that is the organization I work for, and we cover the entire Southeast portion of the United States in terms of accessibility training. So the website I have for you today, emailing a bunch of files sometimes takes up data, and it clogs up your inbox and my inbox. So I hooked up a little Google Sites. I'm not sure if any of you use them, but they're fantastic. And I'm going to copy this link into the chat of the Zoom. And if you want to follow it, I'll give you a brief explanation of what's on the site today, but try not to just like eat it all up as you're going along, because I'll kind of come back to it back and forth as we go over the presentation today. But I felt like it would be the easiest way for you guys out there in Cyberland to get these resources. So as I scroll down through the page, primarily, we're going to focus on the digital accessibility PDF. It's not maybe the handiest way to give it to you. It's definitely not the most accessible. We'll talk about that. But it is a way to quickly look at the PDF I have, but it will be shared on the screen too. So just if you want to come back to it, a lot of the things that we're going to talk about today are practice, but some of them are live demos as well. So just as we go through the site and go through the presentation, these are the resources I'll be referring to. They're straight out of the presentation. And there's a couple of these videos that I always put them in my presentations, and I get to use them from time to time, but I never have time. And every time I use them, it eats up just a large portion of my time, and they're so good. So I wanted to include them here. They're great Kickstarters about why accessibility is important. And this Bingo Bakery down here is fantastic when we talk about web navigation. And again, I'll come back to it, and it's so hard not to play them. But when we're talking about accessibility of information communication technology, or really digital accessibility is what I titled this session, it's checklist going through documentation and looking at standards and how things, what are the standards for electronic and digital accessibility. And again, we'll go through all of this in a more presentation way. I just want to cover what's on the site for you. And these are all resources that you can click on or go to the full page link, download. They're fantastic PDFs, authoring guides for everything that we're going to talk about today. And it's just a ton of information. This comes from a real well-respected source, and I'll get into who they are. Not mine, but feel free to use them, share them. Just use everything you can. Anyway, that website is up here at the top. It's sites.google.com/AIDB.org/CAT Digital Accessibility. It's a mouthful, so it is in the chat. And wait, did I put it in the chat, or Ashley, did I send it to you? I just sent it to you, but thank you for sending it to everyone else.
No problem.
Okay, so I'm going to switch over to our presentation, and hopefully you will join me. There we go. We'll minimize some of this. There. So, and a lot of this is going to come outside again of the presentation because it is a lot of document accessibility is hands-on. It is remediation's hands-on, and just thinking about the larger scope of what it means to be accessible digitally, it just takes some one-on-one walking you through what it is. And there's not many of us here today, and that is absolutely cool. So I'm 100%, if you have a question for me in the chat, like Ashley said, please, feel free to ask. I'm very approachable, despite my big headphones. Please, feel free to ask any questions as you go along. And Ashley, if you don't mind, would you just monitor that and yell at me if you have something?
Absolutely, y'all. He's not as grizzly bear as his beard.
That's right. That's right.
Let's make this casual. So if y'all have questions, please let us know.
That's right. There's a QR code here, and I realized I was blocking it. That's my hi, hello. I don't have business cards with me at all points, so I often give that to people. It's got my full contact information, not just my email. Feel free to scan it, link it, or again, just email me. And that is in the PDF. Again, this is the resource website. So if you do need a copy of it to come back to later, I'll leave it up. This site for me should not change. So you should, if anything, it should get better. You shouldn't have an issue coming back to it. So we've got a few objectives. We're going to identify types of ICT, information communication technology. So I'm just going to say ICT from now on, and then after we read the definition, will be a little bit easier. And we'll learn concerns and solution as it relates to accessibility. We'll review a ton of resources you've already kind of glimpsed at for 508 standards and web content accessibility guidelines, or WCAG is how I like to say it. Some people call it WCAG, which is really weird, but WCAG standards, which govern the web. You'll get an understanding of some laws and accessibilities that govern ICT access, and you'll review really how to remediate documents and how to best really advise individuals and provide resources on document remediation. Like, what does it mean to take a Word file and make it accessible? What does it mean to take a PDF and do that? You're not going to be pros at it, but I'll give you the tools that when we're done, you'll be able to take them and become pros with it. So ICT, information and communication technology. And guys, I teach to blind individuals and visually impaired, so I do read slides. It's just how it comes in, but we'll talk about it as we go along. It's just a nature as a teacher of the visually impaired at me. But any equipment or system that we use to create, convert, duplicate, or access information and data. So it's a really broad definition, right? Telephones, smart devices, TVs, DVD players, internet, PDF documents, content on DVDs, CDs, which is really weird because I don't think we use those that much anymore. But really, ICT is this idea of, and that's why I changed the title. It is access to a digital space. And unless you are a engineer or developer, and I mean electric engineer or computer engineer, should I say, unless you're operating at that level, integrating accessibility is something that you're going to be doing as more of a consumer, apart from document creation, which is something that you can absolutely influence the accessibility of things you create. So like, for instance, I feel very few of us, if any, on the Zoom today are going to be creating our own televisions. But ICT laws do govern televisions, and individuals with disabilities have rights to access that. And it really goes to govern telephones. If your agency, and this was an issue in an agency that I have worked with, that their phone systems weren't accessible to deaf individuals. They weren't brightly lit and don't have access to individuals with visual impairments. So they had to work around different systems to accommodate that. So it's really this wide gambit when you talk about ICT of things an organization can do to basically understand the accessibility needs for all of their employees and consumers. So this also governs as well at a higher level administration. It really governs like who are you purchasing from? And on the next slide, I have a great chart that shows integration into that. But it's really what levels is your company checking for accessibility? If you've got a giant contract for phones that go on everyone's desk, that's an ICT issue, right? It really should be. It's an information and communication technology. It needs to be accessible to someone with an impairment. So generally, all of these things, and I'm using phones as an example, if it's purchased on a larger scale, the company does what they can to accommodate this. It hasn't traditionally been 100% in the past. It's still not today, but it is a goal to have in mind and something to work for. So a company with this, and I say a company, an institution, anyone with this goal in mind is looking at these standards and these standards for access, and in this case, like phones or what have you, to better accommodate individuals with disabilities when they're making these big sales, when they're accommodating the offices. And it really is a systemic change through an organization. A lot of the bigger tech companies that kind of practice what they preach will not buy from a vendor who's not providing all of these standards in their technology, and making sure that the companies they're dealing with are up to those standards as well, because they do believe in the message of disability inclusion. So it's a very, very broad term is what I'm getting at. We're really focusing today on what it means to make documents and things that we put out in the public accessible, and what it means to make web pages accessible. But ICT covers a number of different things. And I remember when I was researching the phone issue, it was a rabbit hole. It really is. There's a lot of things that can cover this. So the standard that I tend to use is 508 compliance, and Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act essentially requires federal agencies, so the feds, to develop, procure, maintain, and use any information and communication technology, right, that ICT, that is accessible to people with disabilities, regardless of whether they work for the federal government. So there is a longer definition, and they include training, they include website accessibility. Some of what we're doing right now is a mandate from the feds, which I love this. I really do. And it's something that in my professional career as an assistive technology specialist for blind, it's something I think more agencies and more educational institutions need to be aware of. I think it's not really that they don't want to do it, it's just they're not aware of what this really is. And so these are standards written by the feds to include everyone. If the federal government cannot discriminate on race, disability, sex, gender, and so that being said, they can't discriminate with their digital documentation or their digital presence or their means of contact. And again, it's a big concept, but what we're going to focus on really is it's a standard of accessibility. As an accessibility professional, sometimes you hear from a consumer, this isn't accessible. Well, what do they mean? And like, what is that standard of accessibility? And what I've always liked is if I go to these 508 compliance standards, they're written to include the most amount of individuals with disabilities possible. Like they're meant to be universal standards to bring everyone in and try to accommodate for everyone's needs, because it sounds like an impossible task, but they kind of write standards to help you process through that. So this was the model I was mentioning earlier. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on it, but I really do like the idea of accessibility and digital inclusion like this, and the idea of ICT and accessibility is not one person's issue. It's not just Jason Martin hanging out at CAT. It's an organizational issue. It has to come down to purchasing, leadership, information technology, across the gamut. Individuals have to be on board and trained with accessibility. So that doesn't really happen at first. And really, it's that you don't have an assessment of what your business or educational institution is doing. And the second one is that you start that you go, hey, all right, we need to look at how we're addressing accessibility, how we're defining this. When you work through, and what I love about Microsoft is there is a level access that kind of combines with this. And I think I'll cut off a piece of this slide. So let me kind of enhance it a little bit. Yeah. What I love about this is that it comes in layers. And again, you can go and take a look at the way Microsoft Accessibility Leadership Team, actually, I clicked on it. I put a link in it. This one I did not include in the website, but it's how you manage accessibility like a business. I wondered why I wasn't getting all the information I needed from that slide. This is why. So it really is a great way to hand employers or hand professionals in the field a glance at what a business should be and how it should start embracing accessibility. And Microsoft doesn't say that you should do it all at once. It's a staggered approach to really get there. I will include this on the website, so if you come back to it a little later, I'll put that in. But I just really love their, accessibility at a glance, autism hiring playbook, supported employment toolkits, and accessibility insights, which is something we're going to talk about today. But it's just a great place to start. Oh. So why should you be 508 compliant if you're not a federal agency? Because it is a federal mandate, right? And so if you're anything you submit, it could be returned for remediation. I know some organizations have to submit things to the federal government and others don't. But if you do, your budgets, your documentation, the documents that you're sending, and really it's like an annual report, it's big things that the feds are going to remediate, that they have to be accessible. So that's one thing. Say if you're not working for the federal government, but you're submitting information to them, it needs to be accessible. Really, if you have no involvement with the feds, it really integrates the best practice for creating digital files. So when you do these steps of digital inclusion and digital accessibility, you're making files better for not only you, but for your entire agency and not only people with disabilities. When you put information out there, it could avoid potentially damaging lawsuits, and it makes, again, documents easier for all employees. It's just great to have. It's like when you build a computer or you're working with a computer very early on, you can clutter it up with unorganized files and just jumble everything everywhere. And sometimes there is madness to that chaos. But you can also take the time and organize things the right way, and it makes it a whole lot easier to search and use documents. And that's what really digital inclusion is about. So again, the TED Talk with Austin Seraphin, please go check that out when we have a little more time. And today we're going to focus really on office accessibility. And I say office accessibility, it is 508 standards, but I just got to say that Office and the Office line of products is the easiest set of tools, them and Adobe. But Outlook, Word, and PowerPoint are some of the easiest tools to include accessibility and to know you've checked all the boxes, that you got everything right. Google Slides and Google Docs have a limited access to accessibility functions. So like you can do some of the things I'm going to show you in Google Docs. There are ways to remediate with things with G Suite, and I would say like Apple Doc or like Pages and some of those other things as well. But Microsoft really is the standard for this. So if you have access to Word and you're pushing something out like publicly, I do like to use Word for that reason. So 508 checklist from hhs.gov. So I used to do this presentation differently. I used to take everyone through what the 508 standards were before showing you this nice, sweet checklist. And I think I want to do it backwards this time, because usually people are probably bored to tears and intimidated by these standards, and they have no idea how they're going to surmount them. And then when they see these checklists, they very much understand, all right, this is not as hard as the standards make it sound. So I'm going to take a second and go back to that website I gave you earlier. And all of these in the PowerPoint do connect to the actual website, but they're linked through the website that I created. Okay. So I'm scrolling down to checklist and authoring guides. And what I want to look at first is the word 508 checklist. I'm going to open this in just a PDF reader. Oh, come on, take me in here. I think I gave it access to my life right there, but that's okay. Okay, so I don't usually use these through the web, but we'll take a look at it this way and just increase it, because I don't generally open up documents. Let me just download it. Actually, I have them on my computer, so I don't have to go through the web to do this. But this is the document that I'm looking at. And for Word documents, and that's anything, typeface documents, it's not necessarily Microsoft Word, but this could be Google as well. But in this slide or in this checklist, it goes through all of the 508 standards, this 1.1, 1.2, 1.5, and it breaks it down in really easy chunks for a person to understand and to remediate. So like, and even if you don't understand all the terminology before we go through it, it's a lot easier to understand than the standards themselves. So does the document file name not contain any spaces or special characters? It's fairly straightforward, right? Like, does it include an exclamation mark and spaces is a weird thing actually, because we put spaces in our file names all the time, but the actual standard is to put an underscore. I think with some displays and some assistive technology, it's used more. And again, these standards, some of you may notice that they are from 2016. Those are the most recent accessibility 508 document standards that we have. And I find that a little odd, but I have been using them for years and they still are the most current through the web. So this could change. I have a feeling that it will, but for right now, this does meet the standard. Is the file name concise? Generally limited to 20 or 30 characters. So if, again, I open up File, Save As, and go through that, is the name concise? Is it board report for August 22nd, or is it board report? So this is the nice checklist. When I'm publishing something or sending something out for my company, for my organization, that I know needs to be 100% accessible. Now, again, and understand that honestly, there are times that you can't connect. I mean, like you don't have time to go through all of those things before you put it out. And while that's not a best practice, I think we all need to do better. This is getting everyone on board to be able to do these standards. And they are fairly quick and easy when you're in the habit of creating documents that way. So this checklist, I use it like if I was to create every document, do I have a checklist for every document? No, I do not. But if this document is being submitted to the feds, if this is something going on my public website to be reviewed, I have a document like this that I sign off on that shows that I went through all of these checklists to make sure that what I'm putting out is accessible to all individuals with disabilities. And so I'm skimming through this pretty quickly just to show you the format of the checklist that they offer. And again, general layout and formatting requirements. It lays everything out that you might need to do. And then you may be asking yourself, well, with some of these things, a tabular appearance and a tabular structure, what does some of this stuff mean? And it could seem like jargon. That's where our lovely guides come in at, our authoring and testing guides. And again, I used to save these until after I use the standards, but I like being nice now. So the authoring and testing guides, these are fantastic. All of them really are. If I don't make Excel documents accessible on the daily, but if I need to make something accessible publicly, I use this accessible electronic document community of practice authoring guide. They are great. And again, this one was pulled recently, but I think the last update was, the revision to this was 2018. So those same standards that I showed you on the checklist that we get to initial off on and go, yes, this document is accessible, are right here. But if you ever took a computer class, this kind of reminds you of some of the lessons that you might have taken in that class. So it's got a nice table of contents, text formatting, object formatting, color formatting. So it goes through all of the standards that you would need to be meeting. But it does it kind of like an old textbook. And it's going to show you, and this does change slightly from older versions of Word to this, but not really. The meat and potatoes are still there. And really, it gets easier as you go. So for instance, this first standard, when we talk about is the name descriptive, it gives you a bit of a description. So look in the Windows bar, change the description, and then go down step by step on how to do this. It mentions restricting editing, certain things that you need to basically make sure the options aren't checked. Again, visually, this might look a little bit different in a newer version of Word or something like that, but rest assured the options and things are still there. So these are just basic semantics that generally Word almost covers automatically, but it's good to go check just to make sure that you're meeting with those standards. And I know this is a little jumbled on the page, but I hope you guys can view that nicely, especially where you're, again, you've got access to this document as well. So text formatting, document headings, use Microsoft Word headings. So one of the best things I love about using Word and using docs is the style of headings. So it meets these standards, and I'm going to show you quickly how to remediate headings, but this shows you in very plain text what I would show you. It's a great walkthrough on how you should be creating documents in a certain way. So I'm going to just go copy something from the web. Cats. 10 classic poems about cats. Let's see if we can get a nice non-picture related cat. This will work. I'm just copying some text just so we can play around with how we want it to look. And I'm opening up Microsoft Word. There we go. And this is in high contrast mode, just dark mode. I hope it's easy for everyone to see. If you can't, please let me know. So it's just easier on the eyes, I think, than looking at a bright background. So I'm just going to paste everything that we just got. All right. So we got just some random text. Now, none of this is inherently accessible, but what we're focusing on, and I'm going to tab very quickly to go back to those standards and show you what we're looking at. Close this. So what we're going to be looking at is headings. So that's one of the standards to make documents accessible. Text formatting. Do document headings use Microsoft Word heading styles? So this right here, and the 10 classic poems about cats everyone should use. And again, this could be a document that you're creating It's a table of contents. The web page I gave you follows this same pattern. Emails follow this pattern. If you're sending out an agenda, it all follows this pattern, and it makes it easier for individuals with disabilities to navigate. So I'm going to give you an example. This 10 classic poems about cats it's really a title. And that's the title of our document here. This could be whatever the page is. Resources. I think if you look at the cat page I just sent you that says digital accessibility, that's the title on the page. It helps the screen reader orient itself. So in between, we have a number of different things. So this is really a paragraph text, and that's fine. And this is some junk we got off the internet, and that's okay. We'll just delete that out. That's nothing, that has no pertinence to what we're doing. But so if we're moving to a heading, like this one, this next sentence was made by Anonymous about another cat. This heading is similar to an outline. It would be heading level 1. We would want to make sure that we are including headings as we go along in something. So like, again, this is an example of poetry. So this again would be heading level 1. Now, you don't have to keep the style. Like it makes it jumbo and big. That's just kind of a web style. So you can shrink that back down to whatever font you had it at. You could make it look different, however you want. But what this does in a Word document or a Google Docs document is it changes the text to become an HTML element that's more than just plain text. And it allows a person with a disability or a screen reader to navigate it very, very quickly. So when I do this again, this is a heading and this is a heading, but say I had, I'm gonna go underneath it, just another poem about I hope I spelled that right. More about Emily. No, I did not. I knew something was off there. More about Emily Dickinson. So say the first heading is her poems, but we're going to have more. It's kind of like we would do an outline in Word or something of that nature, is that we'd go a heading level 2. That and generally most people don't get into heading level 3 or 4, but you can, like in you know, and I'm terrible at examples, but raps from Emily. That's the third heading that nobody knew about existed. And so it would make a heading level 3, maybe something new that you didn't know about. And it's just a way to structure documents to read more fluidly and to be more accessible. I'll give you a cool way of looking at these headings as you go along. So
AJ,
one thing that, yes.
I have a question. I mean,
Yes.
I gotta learn. I need more information about raps from Emily Dickinson, but did not know she was a rapper. But
You never know with me what you're gonna get.
I know. I'm a repeat offender of not using those text styles because I don't take the time to go in and edit that particular style. And I don't like going and having to change each time I select like the heading style. How easy is it to go in and edit those to suit your document?
And you're gonna ask me that, and I promise you, I know the answer, but right now I don't. Like there's an option to,
Sorry.
no, because it's a valid question. And right there, I just answered it because I'm awesome. So you right click it and hit modify. And so you can come in and then make these look Times New Roman. I can make it 14. So every time now I do this, it's a 14 heading. So like, for instance, it's not going to come up big and jumbo, right? But so this would be the same heading level 1 that we just did, but I changed that default to be that.
Yes. Okay. Thank you so much for showing that.
Oh, no problem. That was right click, modify, and headings. Because I'll be honest with you, that's the most annoying thing in the world. To do this and to do it quickly, it's going to change your groove. Now, I do think it is kind of nice if you go and set these up to something you like. For instance, while we're here, I guess, uh, I don't see my title heading up top. That's fine. But while we're doing heading level ones, let's take a minute and actually do this for myself. And it could be a situation where you like different colors, you like different things to add in. There we go. So maybe I want this nice deep blue for all of my headings. I'm going to now do all of that just for me. Again, you don't have to. What's nice about doing this for yourself and for students, I'm going to just delete this out for simplicity's sake, is that when you're making headings, when you're organizing it this way, in a reliable way, and we're going to make another one, another heading underneath, just to show the point. Edward Thomas, YouTube star, things you didn't know about them. And we're going to make that a heading level 2. And I'm doing this just honestly to show you the organization. Now, I'm a forgetful person. I forget all the time where things are in Microsoft Word. So I love the search bar up at the top, and we're going to talk about it again a little later. They used to call it the Tell Me bar. I don't think they call it that anymore. That's kind of a lame name, but it still might be called the Tell Me function or just the search bar. But I'm looking for the navigation pane, and I cannot remember exactly where it is. So type in the word navigation and show the navigation pane. So sweet, all of these cool headings and things that we have put in are now clickable links that a person with a disability could go through, and not just a person with a disability, anyone. This is that idea of universal design here, is that anybody could go into navigation and have a nice convenient way to navigate through your document. Now, this might be plain stuff for some people who are like Word, Microsoft Word nerds, who knows, or like amazing secretaries. They know all of this stuff. The really good ones are doing it without knowing they're making their documents accessible. So one thing that you can also do, and I like about including headings and titles through this, so I'm just going to close out of my navigation bar, but it is just a nice way to see it. And a blind person that's using a screen reader, or a person who's using another type of assistive technology, might use these anonymous or like these headings over here to be able to skip around the document more effectively. So maybe they don't need to start at they're a kid in your class and they don't need to hear about anonymous Pangraban every time. They might want to skip down here where Edward Thomas is a YouTube star. And instead of doing 50 or 60 keystrokes, they can just do that in about 2. So it's really the quick way of showing how this standard can be met. So I'm going to keep our document open and go back. I know that we're on time, but showing live demonstrations I think is important. But also looking at some of this info, it's pretty cool just to go straight forward through it. Like if you've got access to Word, you can do this too. Our list formatted correctly. So there's a portion in this where I'm going to say, are you using Word to do it? And if you're not, then it's not accessible. So if you are, because you're like, yeah, I'm using Word to make a list, duh, it's easier, then you're making things accessible. Let me explain this concept, and it's going to come up a few different ways. So if I weirdly, and I'm going to try to do it, and sometimes I can't, if I'm going to type a numbered list, I'm going to type 1, and then Word goes, hey, you're doing a list. And I'm like, yeah, Word, I am. And if I just say pizza, that is not pizza. Pizza, there we go. French fries. Soda. Clearly, I've not eaten lunch today. So if you are eating lunch, I'm jealous. But pizza, French fries, and soda, this is popped up in a list. Again, to a person with a disability that's using a screen reader to navigate through this auto-generated list helps. There's coding behind it that allows an access point to see what's in this list, that it is in fact a numbered list. So the incorrect way to do this, and some people do, one, they turn autocorrect off because I don't want to turn it off immediately. So one, two, three. Yeah, see, it's very hard to undo this, but essentially put, you need to be using list that word generates. So this comes into question sometimes when people are doing bulleted lists. They will insert a picture of a bullet and tab over. It's really weird. But if you want to include a bulleted list, just simply use the bullets feature. Most people are doing this again, but occasionally you'll see where someone copies this and creates their own bulleted list somewhere in the middle of things. So it's very strange, but you've almost got to go out of your way to do this. So a couple of things you're going to see: are lists formatted correctly? Are you using the list function? Yes, I am. Are columns formatted correctly? This is another one that's kind of weird. And we're going to take these two blocks of text. So where some actually, I like doing it with pizza and French fries and soda generally. Pizza. Okay, so some people would make a column list: pizza, uh, toast, cheese. I don't know what monster would make their things this way anymore. I really don't. And I joke when I call people that, but some people would make their columns this way because maybe they don't know the other functions. So I'm going to take all that out. And when you make a column, you would use the columns feature and get out all this extra stuff. So pizza, soda, toast, cheese, and it might not be enough information to make two columns, but I'm going to right click and where was columns again? So I always use the search feature. Columns. How to remove columns. Yes, one, two. Let's do two. There we go. So now that's going to read right in a screen reader, and it's so much easier for you to use. So a lot of these things in these standards that are very, very spooky to look at are kind of simple, and they're already included basically in what you should be doing as a good computer practitioner. Our layouts for tables formatted correctly. Okay. And it does give you some particular instances that you do need to look at in terms of table properties, like what should I look at inside? Text wrapping should be at none. So it's things like that stuff that over time of looking through how to do this, that you learn. Like text wrapping is where the text will come up right next to an image. I'll give you an idea. Insert pictures. Let's go stock images. Can we find anything cool? That one's cool. Okay. So you see this icon that comes up to the side, and this is referring to tables, but it's also with images as well. There's layout options. So in line with text, that's the accessible way to do it. Where people go horribly, horribly wrong in Word, generally, is they use text wrapping. And okay, that's fine. What's the difference, you may ask, Jason? Let's make it a little smaller because this is how they do it. They get a cute logo that goes somewhere in here, and it looks awesome because it makes their page nice and neat and interesting. But the problem is the screen reader doesn't know where to include this. It gets very, very confused, and it makes it very difficult when doing a reading order, or it's tough for computers to understand it. So when you do inline with text, man, doesn't that just look a little uglier? It does. It honestly does, but it's more accessible. So you have to work with that as a design parameter and how you would do it. And you could maybe hit enter or, put this image in a different place, but it's just not going to have that cool magazine look maybe that you wanted, but you could maybe format differently and look at it differently from the get-go. and it could become more accessible to someone with a disability. This is in line with text now. So in case of Pete the cat here and Pangraban, he's in line with text. Now, is that visually attractive? Absolutely not. So I would actually, he might be over text somewhere. Oh, he's in line. Okay. So this is just one of those things in terms of images that when creating documents, you need to take a look at. And I'm looking at our time because I know we're booking through it.
I
So
think one that I would like to mention is doing a page break rather than hitting enter to get to the next page.
Absolutely.
Can you explain why that's important?
Yes, yes, I can, because what she's referring to, and it's probably in here somewhere. I can't remember which standard it is, but it is in there. So, all right, here's a good place to do it. Emily Dickinson should come up on the next page because, well, it's maybe cutting off some of her poetry right here. So what people do very, very often, enough, I think that Ashley's even irked by it, is they'll go, well, we're just going to move that down by hitting enter. And I'm trying to see where my paragraph button is. I can't. There it is. Yay. So it shows that I hit enter a bunch of times. Well, sometimes people will do that to create maybe a whole new page. They'll go, oh, I'm just going to make a new page in this document. Well, to a person using a screen reader, this is one line every time that they have to go down, and it says blank, 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 blank. So if I get to about this line right here, I'm going to go, well, you know what? That must be all that's in this document. But there's a lot more coming through here. So the way we would do that, and this is the bad way to hit enter, and okay, we've all done it. I have. And then you have a weird wonky looking document later when you try to edit it. If you've ever had a resume from the early 2000s, and then you try to edit it and it's nothing anyway, nothing works. So a way to skip through this is by hitting Control Enter or inserting a page break. And if I needed to, I'm sure I could come up and hit search, page break, maybe insert page break. I could do it that way. I'm old fashioned and it's Control Enter. And so it's going to show me here that there's a page break. And it doesn't include any blank space. So for instance, I just did it again. And instead of a person arrowing down 33 times or however many, they only arrow down 1, 2, twice. So what, and in this case, it's because there's 2 page breaks here. If this was gone, for instance, it would break it, but it needed to be. So it's a way to include that spacing in a page where maybe visually you want a blank page for emphasis. It's chapter 2 of your new book. But the right way to do that is this. And this really affects any document. You see it a lot where people are trying to make stuff match. And this is maybe a poor example, but it's a quintessential tool for accessibility. And it is in these standards somewhere.
And it's yes, easy to learn Control Enter and just make it a habit from now on. That can be the first thing you start implementing.
To do Control Enter.
Control Enter.
So there are language development questions like, or is this a foreign language? Generally, the only language we see in documentation, many folks don't have an issue with this standard because most of our documents are in English. But if you ever need to have this, it's there. If you ever question it, well, what do I do with this? You select the actual language. I'm kind of trucking through. Our link name's descriptive. Okay. If there's one thing you get, and a lot of these standards, when I focus a lot on Word, but these go to PowerPoint, they go to PDF accessibility, and they go to web accessibility. They're the same standards really for a lot of documents. But this is one thing that irks the living stew out of me. And it is one of the standards. If you include a link to Pizza Hut, pizzahut.com. Okay, that's a pretty descriptive link, right? Like if I was to search that out and find it, it would say Pizza Hut. Okay, what I see a lot is if you need to register, click here. And then here is a link. One useful command that a lot of people do not use is embedding links. And I think more people are now that they know they can do it, but that's hitting Control K or right clicking and inserting a link. Right click, insert link. I use so many commands, yeah. So here I can put in any address, like I can go to www.pizzahut.com. So that's going to do this, or this could be your conference registration. But if on that same web page, to find out where we are located, click here. And we're going to go to Google Maps instead, or maps.google.com. Okay, so to a screen reader and to a person looking at just the links, these are the same exact thing. All they could be getting, and they do quite frequently on the web, are links that say here, click here. And they're not very descriptive. You could make this entire phrase a link. To find out where we're located, click here. Or follow this link to find where we're located. There are different ways that you can phrase things. And so just be descriptive when you do that, or our pizza location, and make that a link instead of just doing click here. It's a very bad practice. And if you don't know how to link things, it really is a skill that's awesome to learn. Because if I needed to go to Pizza Hut, oh, that website's not valid. But if I'm going to Pizza Hut in a document, or if I'm referencing something, pizzahut.com, it goes that quickly. And it's great to do that in documentation. Instead of, if I did a Google search for Pizza Hut, and this is what you see a lot, well, I'll use this as an example. But say this would often be the Google search results. And people will paste that and go, well, here's the link to the website that an individual with a disability can go to. Or if you want more resources, go here, and they'll post that. Well, if a person with a screen reader is using this, it's going to read every bit of jargon and junk and numbers in that link. And it's so much easier to go Pizza Hut, Control K, and I'm pasting that giant link there. That's so much more descriptive. It helps a person out, and visually it helps you out too. Let's carry over real quick and close up remarks with you. So in this, there just really is a ton of information that you can go through. But it's easy stuff like this, and I say it's easy. Like this is the insert hyperlink window that's going through that, going through those steps. It's easy if you can follow step-by-step information. There are all of this information. There are loaded videos. There's a ton of website information that you can locate that has from this section 508.gov. Let me take you there before we break. So that's where a lot of these trainings come from, and I absolutely love them. But it's section 508.gov, content creation, create PDFs, create a spreadsheet, create a document. All of this information is on here. They have video training. Now, I like to say that I'm a little more peppy than they are, but it's stuff that it really takes time, and it takes more than one voice and more than one person to hear all of the parameters that go through it. But you can come to this website, section 508.gov. It's included in the PowerPoint as well. And it does take you through all of these modules. I find it very successful if I'm working on PDFs. It has all these authoring guides that I've given you the links for. 2017 for some of them. 2019 maybe on my PDF guides. So wait, am I wrong to say that my Word documents? 2017. So, or 2019 is the latest Word document. So yeah, you can get basically the most updated guides to all this information. So going through it and learning these standards is definitely going to help you. I would just coming back, I would say that PDF documentation and PDF document remediation is the most difficult, but PowerPoint, Google Slides, Docs, and Word are very easy to all follow these guidelines with and do it. And really, you shouldn't have any issues. This training also, when you don't focus on the standards, when you don't focus on the resources, when you're working with a group of administrators or people developing documents, assistants, whoever in your organization that's creating a lot of stuff, it is very easy just to not focus on the bigger picture that we've looked at, but really only focus on, well, what do you do when you make a document to make it right? And you can use examples of your own documentation to kind of go through it and give those standards out. Are there some things in the chat that I'm missing? And I know we're about time to leave.
Not regarding this. I've been putting in the links.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Ashley. There's a ton of information, and it really spans the gambit. Let me come back to my page, and then is there anything, Ashley, you have any questions about? I know that it's never enough time to cover all of that topic in an hour. It's just not.
It's not. This could be expanded so far. Like you said, you can go into a rabbit hole with some of these topics, but I think it's great because so much of this applies even to doing links on websites and pictures on websites and making sure you have headings. And I mean, it applies in so many different platforms.
And just to be clear that, some of those standards that we talked about really were for documents. There are web standards. Where am I at? Down here. And I knew we would not get to this, but I did want to include it. But there are web standards in this section, and all of these are links that are included as well. I want to kind of give you that guidance to well, what is this behemoth that he's talking about? Well, there are web standards for WCAG 2.0, and those govern the web, where 508 primarily covers documentation. This does cover the web. Now, they do mix and mingle. 508 covers part of the web, but when people ask about web accessibility, these are those guidelines. So all that information is included on the sites and through the slides as well.
Thank you for that. All right.
No problem, Ashley.
Did you have anything else you want to address today? I do have a survey I need everyone to complete before we finish.
No, I'm just going to come back to this first slide because, again, this is quite a bit of information. If you need any assistance, any further training, please reach out to the Center of Assistive Technology Training or you great guys at where you're at, Ashley.
Thank you, Jason. All right, so everybody hold on tight.